So this is the final of changing over Nicad batteries to lithium-ion batteries in a Dewalt drill. This is the drill, and this is what we're going to change over. So this is the battery pack from the Nicad. This is the Nicad battery pack. After it's been disassembled from the container for the Dewalt drill. We need to save this part up here, the connector. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this off of the battery pack and then cut the negative pole, which is this pole out here, and the positive pole, which is this wire going down this way. We're going to cut those off and remove it from this top battery. So this is the top battery removed, and we've cut the positive wire off from the battery below, and the negative wire is still attached to the top of this battery, and we need to cut that off, leaving some of the metal available for the connector, because we're going to have to solder a wire to that as well. So this is the connector removed from the battery, and we've got the battery post here for that's the positive terminal, and we've got a negative terminal here, and this terminal in the middle is also a negative terminal, comes out here, and that's used in the charger for the original Dewalt battery charger. But we're not going to be using that. We're just going to desolder the wire that's on there and leave that loose, so that when the battery goes back into the Dewalt charger as a lithium ion, it won't accidentally charge for the lithium ion batteries in a Nicad charger. Now what this is a drawing of a wood dowel. You just have to buy a wooden dowel that's 3/4 of an inch in diameter and sand a flat on it, and it's going to be 1 11/16 inch long. That's going to replace the battery that we removed with that connector on top of it, and we're going to glue the connector to the top of this dowel, and we're going to do that with 5-minute epoxy, and then we're going to solder a wire onto the negative pole, and that's going to go down alongside this flat that's in here. So you need to sand a flat on there with a power sander to get that sanded down. It doesn't need to be real accurate on size or anything. You just want some space to get some wire down there. So this is the connector epoxied onto the wood dowel. This happens to be a plastic dowel, but you can do it with the wood dowel, no problem. And this is the connector, the wire coming off, the terminal coming off of the positive, and this is the negative terminal. And we're going to solder a wire to the negative terminal, and we're going to solder a wire to the positive terminal, and then we're going to tape those wires around this wood dowel. So this is that wood dowel with the connector, and we've got a wire connected to the positive side and a wire connected to the negative side. I would recommend that you put a red wire on the positive side and a black wire on the negative side. Here I've got it hooked up incorrectly. I had accidentally put a red wire, and this looks yellow on this, but it's really a red wire. I had accidentally put a red wire on the negative and a black wire on the positive. You want to switch that around. You know it's a positive because it's machined such that it fits inside this container, this tower here. The machine side comes up here on this side, and that's the positive side. So you want a red wire on the positive connector and a black wire on the negative connector. Next, we want to solder wires to the batteries. These are the batteries here. I've got the batteries held in place with a tie wrap, and I'm just holding it with a clamp so that I can solder the wires to that. And these 3 batteries are going to be hooked up in series. So I've got the first battery here, and I think this is the first battery, and there's a wire coming off of that for the negative pole, and then we got the connection here from the negative to the positive of the second to the third battery, and then a wire coming off of that second battery to go to the BMS. So these 2 wires here are going to end up going to the BMS. One to the 0 volt pad, the other one to the 8.4 volt pad on the BMS. Okay, this is the 3 batteries all soldered up, and the wires running to the BMS. Now this is the BMS up here. BMS stands for Battery Management System, and that controls discharge rate, so you don't discharge the batteries too much. Nicad or lithium-ion batteries cannot be overly discharged. You don't want to discharge them. These batteries pass 2.5 volts, and this board keeps you from doing that. And they don't want to be overly charged. You don't want to charge them to more than 4.2 volts each. And this BMS controls that so that you don't overcharge them as well. Now, these wires that are coming off of the batteries are going to particular pads on this BMS, and the BMS is all marked with the voltage wire that's supposed to be connected to that pad. And there's 4 pads on this board, a 0 volt pad, and a 4.2 volt pad, which would be the positive of the very first battery, and then an 8.4 volt pad, which would be the positive of the second battery, and then a 12.6 volt pad, which would be the positive of the third battery. So I've got this all connected up. Now you don't want your wires too long, because all those wires end up having to go inside this container here. So you want them long enough that you can solder to the board fine, but you don't want them too long that you can't get everything positioned inside this container. Now what you're going to want to do is make a connector that goes into the housing of the battery pack that can handle the charger for the battery pack. And the way we've got this hooked up is the charger that we've acquired. We're hooking up a wire to that charger, and that wire, the black wire here, is coming off of the outside connector of this jack, and that's going to carry our negative from the charger, and the center male post inside this is carrying the positive from the charger. So you just want to solder a couple of wires to this connector so that you can solder that onto the BMS as well. Now those wires are going to get soldered to the plus and minus poles of the BMS. And when you get a BMS, you'll see those plus and minus poles. Now you're going to want to drill a hole in the battery pack plastic container, and this is going to accept that connector with the red and the black wire that we just soldered on. So you're going to want a hole in there so you can accept that connector. Now what this is showing is this tower, we put the wood dowel with that connector that we glued on with 5-minute epoxy up into this tower. we drilled a small hole through the tower into that wood dowel, and we secured that wood dowel inside this tower with a number 4 screw. So we drilled a small hole and then countersunk that hole to accept this countersink type number 4 screw, and that's what's holding that inside this plastic container. Now you can't get the wood dowel in incorrectly. As long as you glued it on correctly onto that wood dowel, then the positive side will be over here automatically, and that's where we want the positive terminal to be, is on this side. Now this shows it all connected up. This is the connector for the charging down here, and the 2 wires running up, and they go to the plus and the minus terminals on the BMS. And these are the wires coming from that wood dowel with the connector attached to it, and they also get attached to the plus and minus. And then these are the wires, of course, going to the battery. The 4 wires, the 0 volt, the 4.2 volt, the 8.4 volt, and the 12.6 volt wires going to the respective points on the BMS. So this is how it all ends up being connected together. Now what we want to do, this is a hot glue gun right here. We're going to run a bead of hot glue down in between these batteries, all 3 of them, on the 3 corners, and let that hot glue set up, and then we're going to cut this tie wrap off. So the hot glue will be holding those 3 batteries together, and we'll get rid of that tie wrap because there's really no room inside the plastic container to handle that tie wrap. It just gets too cramped in there. This is the final product. Now when you put the batteries into this lower container, along with those wires from the charger, and then the BMS is laying on top, and then the extra wires from this connector up here in the tower, you have to be very careful how you position those wires inside this container. Don't get them pinched between these bosses and crank down. You will cut those wires. I cut it a couple of times. So you have to be very careful where you place those wires. And when you get the wires in there, if you get it in correctly, this yellow top will set down inside the recess of this black container nicely, and you won't use any compression to get this yellow set down into the top in here. So that's the final on how we get the battery pack changed over to lithium ion. The only other thing that I don't have here is the battery charger that we acquired. It'll be on the bill of material, and I'll put the bill of material for all of this in the remarks in the comments below this video. And the charger that comes with this, it ends up having a different type of connector that won't mate to the connector that we put in this lower end down here. So we have to solder on a new connector on the cable end of the battery charger. And when you get that battery charger, all you do is cut off the connector that comes with it. And it has 2 wires in that cable. One is a white wire in the center, and that's the positive wire from the charger. And that'll go to the center of the connector, the mating connector with this. And then the outside wire is a shield, and you just take that shield and attach that to the outer portion of the male connector, and that is the negative of the battery charger. So you have the white wire connected to the center post of the male pin, and you have the shield, which is the negative of the battery charger. You have that connected to the outside of the male pin of that connector. So again, I will have the bill of material in the comments below. And like this video and subscribe to my video. And I hope you have luck with changing over to lithium-ion batteries, because this really worked out well. And I think we won't have memory issues anymore with that. So subscribe to the video and press the ring button, the bell button, so you're notified about further YouTube videos on my channel. And like the video, and thank you very much.